Everyone have a good Shabbos. Exciting. Okay. So we left off. We're giving an overview of the Tanya, and we mentioned that the Gemara says that before a person comes down into this world, they have to make a vow. What's the vow that they make? Basically, it's their mission statement. What is the mission statement? In the words of the Talmud, Ti tzaddik v'al ti rasha. You should be a tzaddik and not a rasha. And the vow continues, but that's the first part of the vow, which is what we're focusing on. You make an oath that you're going to be a tzaddik and not a rasha. And that's like your mission statement. That's the last thing they tell you before you come down into this world. So obviously, it's very important for us to understand what is a tzaddik and what is a rasha. So, the way the world understands it, the looser term of tzaddik in Russia, we explained, is most people would say it, tzaddik is someone who has more good deeds than negative deeds, more mitzvahs than sins. And in Russia, someone who has more sins than mitzvahs. And a Beinoni, the intermediary person, is a person who's 50-50. But we explained that that can't be the case. Because the Gemara makes it clear that even a person who does one Avera is already in the category of a Rasha. And as the famous saying goes, that one of the big chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, his name is Rabbi Hoch. And when he came to the Alter Rebbe, he said that until he learned from the Alter Rebbe, he used to think that he's a tzaddik. That's how he assessed him. He was a lofty individual. He would sit and learn all day. He was a lofty soul. So he always thought of himself as a tzaddik. Once he came to the Alter Rebbe and he learned the teachings of the Tanya, he said, not only am I not a tzaddik, halevai beinoni. I wish I could be a beinoni. So the Tanya right away lifts up the union of a beinoni to someone who is a very lofty individual. And it's, there's some unique individuals in the Hasidic community that people say, he's a beinoni of time. We all have to strive to be a beinoni, but to actually be there on a long-term basis is a very lofty level. But something that's attainable. So, the beinoni is someone who's never sins, as we made clear. It's still on the board here. So the beinoni is 100%. They never do anything against the code of Jewish law. They do all the mitzvahs that they're expected to do. They refrain from all the affairs. So then, what's the difference? We asked. What's the difference between a tzaddik and a beinoni? They seem to both be perfectly righteous people. What's the difference? So what did we say? What was the difference? In the heart. So, in other words, a Jew operates on two levels. There's what you do. There's your thoughts, there's your actions, your words, there's things that you do. And then there's what's going on inside you. So, on a level of action, in terms of what they do, the tzaddik and the beinoni are exactly the same. However, in terms of that's actually for the next class. So in terms of what you feel, there you have very different situations. The beinoni has a heart which is not pure. Obviously, they could have good feelings. They could have feelings of doing the right thing, but they also could and do have negative or inappropriate feelings, not in line with Torah, and they have to battle and control them. That's the beinoni. There's a war going on. Whereas by the tzaddik, a tzaddik is a person who their heart is totally purified. They have no interest whatsoever in something that's against Torah. Not only do they not have any interest in it, but they despise something that's against what Hashem wants. So that's the difference between the tzaddik and the beinoni, what's going on inside them, what's happening inside their heart. Now we say that there's different levels of the tzaddik, but that's not important for now. So that's generally the difference, what's going on with pnimius inside their heart. So if so, we have to zoom in to the heart of a Jew to understand what is actually going on inside the heart, and how could there be that one person so purified and doesn't want any sin, and another one is interested in sin but still has to overcome it. What actually happens inside the inner part of a Jew? So that's what the Alter Rebbe does next. We zoom in to our innermost part. We're getting to know ourselves, not on an operational level, but on a deep, very deep level, the deepest level, what actually takes place inside a Jew. So we zoom in and we're informed something very new, which if you didn't know Tanya, it's a very novel idea, but it's based on many writings of revealed parts of Torah, and it's the third parts of Torah. It says Alter Rebbe that us Jews have two souls. We have two complete souls inside us, a full-on soul, and two of them. So that's new. So we don't just operate with one soul, we have two. Furthermore, says Alter Rebbe, that these two souls are completely opposite from each other. They're total opposites. They're pulling in completely opposite directions. And that's going on inside every single Jew. There's these two souls. So let's get to know them. The first soul, and we call it the first soul because it's the first to enter the body, you're born with it. It comes in right away. The first soul is what we call an animal soul. What do we mean by an animal soul? An animal soul means that it has animalistic desires. It's pleasure seeking. It's all about having a good time in life. It's arrogant. It gets angry. It's an animal. Look at an animal and see how an animal works. And then you just have to figure out that the person is an intelligent being. So it's going to be a different type of animal. It's a lot more sophisticated than the animal that you see walking around. But nevertheless, in its essence, it's an animal. A sophisticated animal. That's one soul. All about pleasure seeking. All about enjoyment in life. Now, but the real issue, or the real depth of this soul, although yes, it gets angry, and it's always looking for pleasure, and it's arrogant. It has all the negative things that can come from this soul. But the real issue here is you want to boil it down to what's this soul about? This animal soul? It's about one thing, me. It's an ego. It's I. It's all self-based. It wants to feed itself more and more. Whatever it thinks is good, but it's all about me. That's the one soul that's inside every single one of us. And it's going to pull you in that direction. In every turn in life, there's going to be one voice inside you that says, let's do what's best for me. Let me have a good time. Whether it's against someone else's benefit, whether it's against what God wants, makes no difference. This is a soul that is animalistic and wants to, it's self-based. It's all about me. And that's one drive inside every single Jew. The other soul, the second soul, is a godly soul. Nefesh Elokis, a godly soul. What's this soul about? What's this soul about? This soul is all about godliness. It wants to connect with God. That's what it's called, a godly soul. It wants to get spiritual. It wants to love God. It does love God. It wants to meditate about God. It wants to do God's mitzvahs. It's a soul that all it wants to do is holy stuff. It wants to hang around holy places and holy people. That's all it wants. And if we get to the core of it, if we dig deep into the core, just like we did by the animal soul, we said the core of the animal soul is ego, is all about I, and from there come all the other issues, that all animal drive, it's all about I. If we go to the core of this soul, it's all about selflessness. And selflessness for God. In other words, in the word, if I'm not mistaken, the Friedrich Rebbe said this, that the I of a Jew, the deepest I of a Jew, I think the words are, their Ich von Ayid is nicht sich. The I of a Jew is not me. Those people, if you dig to the deepest level of them, there's I. That's what lies in the deepest level of a person, the ego. This soul is very different. What lies in its deepest drive is selflessness towards God. So the deepest I of a Jew, or of this godly soul, is not I. And whereas the animal soul feels most comfortable when it gets to feed itself, whatever it is, when it's honored, when it has a lot of respect, when it has power, when it has pleasure, that's where the animal soul thrives. That's what it wants. The godly soul feels most comfortable where it's nullified, where God is the only reality. A godly soul's greatest desire is that God should be revealed. That's the drive of the godly soul, to make God known in His will. So they're very different souls, and they're both operating inside our bodies. Now, a Jew, Dr. Rebbe explains, is not only different from the rest of the world because he has a godly soul. He has the second soul. That's not normal. People, humans, the human race has one soul, just like every other creation. An animal has one soul, and so plants have some level of soul, and even an inanimate being, as Arizal explains, also has some level of a soul. But creation, each thing has its unique individual soul. It's abnormal. It's beyond creation to have two souls. All of the human beings have one soul. So in this way already, there's a Jew is a world apart from a non-Jew. They're worlds apart. Because we have a godly soul. A soul that only wants God. The second soul. But in addition to that, let's leave the godly soul out for a moment. Even in terms of the animal soul of a Jew, we're also different to the rest of mankind. We have a different type of animal soul. As is explained in Tanya, that there are two realms of unholiness. Holiness means for God, everything that's godly. But there are two realms of unholiness. One is the three unclean klippas, which is totally unholy, totally self. And the other one is called klipas noiga, which literally means a translucent shell. Meaning that it does conceal. It does, to some degree, go against or deny God. It conceals over godliness. But nevertheless, it's translucent. Some light comes out, which means there's some good in it. So in these two unholy kingdoms or realms that are discussed in Tanya, one is totally unholy, has no good in it, good meaning it has no selflessness for God in it. And the other kingdom, or the other realm of holiness, has potentially good. It does have some good that could come out. It also has bad, but it also has good. It's a mix. The animal soul of a Jew comes from the latter, from klipas noiga, from the realm of unholiness that has some light inside it. And therefore, even in terms of our animal soul, we don't have to come onto our godly soul. Even in terms of our animal soul, we have some very good character traits, good leaders. As it says, that Jews are merciful people. They are bashful people. They are people who do acts of goodness and kindness, rachmanim. That's the nature of a Jew. And in fact, to the point that if a person doesn't have this nature, you have to question his lineage, as we have in history. Numerous times, certain groups of people displayed the opposite of mercy, and David HaMelech, the kings or the prophets at the time, challenged their lineage. They don't seem to be Jewish. Because Jewish means that you have these things. And that's in terms of your animal soul. You don't have to come onto your godly soul to have this. This is even an animal soul type of trait. There's also negative character traits that will come out because it's from the realm. The animal soul is coming from the unholy realm, but it's from the better of the two, and therefore it's a mix of good traits and not good traits. Whereas the animal soul of a non-Jew comes from the three unclean klippas, meaning the one that's totally unholy. Not bad, just unholy. It's not selfless. It has no selfless drive inside it. So you might see a non-Jew doing a very beautiful act of kindness, mercy, helping another person, showing concern, all kinds of nice things that non-Jews can do. But nevertheless, we're being told over here that act somehow, as the Talmud says, it's not the Alter Rebbe saying, the Talmud says it, they are doing that act somehow to benefit themselves. It doesn't have to be in a very low way, like I'm doing it because I want to get credit and I want to get honor. It could be I'm doing it because it makes me feel better. I can't see that person suffer. It hurts me, so therefore, for myself to feel better, or to clear my conscience, I have to help. But the ability to do a totally selfless act does not exist in the realm of the three unclean clippers. They are unholy. They have no selflessness. They're all about I. That I could be a beautiful, very kind, generous, and so on, but it boils down to me. Whereas the klippas, the better of the two, has some level of selflessness. There's some good. If you notice, we're identifying good as selfless towards God. That's what good means. You can do all kinds of acts that are nice, but is it real goodness? Maybe not. It could be it's your own ego that's driving it. Somehow you stand to benefit from it. So, in conclusion, what we're saying over here is that a Jew is different from a non-Jew, not only because they have an added soul, the godly soul, that's not the only reason. Also, in terms of the animal soul, it's a very different animal soul. Now, we did mention, when we were going through this chapter in detail, that the animal soul of a non-Jew can be from the higher level of the unholy klipa, the klippas nega, when we have a non-Jew that keeps the 7 Noahide laws. The non-Jew that keeps the 7 Noahide laws has a higher level of animal soul, like a Jew. So they would be the same as a Jew in terms of the animals. Any questions before we move on?
Sorry, going back, the 3 unclean clippers. So the first is totally unholy. The second is a mix of the 2.
So the 3 unclean clippers are one realm. They are totally unholy. Why there's 3? It's explained elsewhere. One has to do with fire. One has to do with earth. There's different types of negativity. One is a person who's too passionate, too much fire. Another person is too much earth, it's like heavy, depressed, lazy. There's 3 because there's different realms of unholiness, but that's one idea of total unholiness where there's no good. Then there's another kingdom of unholiness, another realm of unholiness, but it has some good in it. It's called klippas nega, the translucent. So the 3 aren't, we're not dividing between the 3. We're seeing the 3 as one category, and then there's a 4th, that's the second one.
So what is the third one?
I think the 3rd one is water. Yeah.
And how is
One is air. This is a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing now because we're doing just an overview, but just quickly, one I think is air, and one is fire, and one is water. And I don't think earth is counted in this one, actually. Let's explain why not. It's in the prophecy of Yechezkel. He sees a thick cloud, a flaming fire, and a whirlwind. These 3. He sees he sees a referred to over here later on in Tanya. A thick cloud, ruach sa'arav anan gadol. So ruach sa'arav is like a whirlwind, a strong wind, stormy wind. Anan gadol, this would be cloud. Reish mislakachas is a fiery flame. And those are the 3 things that surround the realm of holiness, because this is unholiness. Okay, so we understand that we have 2 souls. Yeah. Question?
Isn't klippat nega more like just neutral? Like apple? use it to for the good or for the what is it? You use the word unholy.
Yeah. There's no such thing as neutral. That's what it says. That's according to Kabbalah Chassidus. There's no such thing as neutral. You're either with us or against us, as George Bush said. There's no such thing. So either you're for the sake of God, somehow connected to Hashem. If not, you're automatically on the other side. That's why the term, one of the terms for the evil realm or the negative realm is Sitra Achra. What does Sitra Achra mean? Other side. You're not on our side, finished. That means you're from the other realm. So it's not neutral, but nevertheless, it has the potential to be elevated. If it's not elevated, then it's on the Kufa side. So, the Alter Rebbe zooms in now. We understand there's two souls, and they're very, very different. One is godly, one is animal. So, we're going to focus on the godly. And a lot of what we're going to say about the godly soul is going to be true about the animal soul too. Because they're souls. And a soul is a similar, just like people, we all look the same. It's an amazing thing. We're all born up the same. All the head, hands, and feet, eyes. It's an amazing thing. All people are, it's like one race. All we're created the same. Souls are the same way. It's exactly the same. If you're a soul, this is your structure. There's a certain structure of a soul. So all the things that we're going to say about the soul and its structure by the godly soul will also apply to the animal soul with a different twist because it's an animal, it's not a godly. But first we're going to zoom in on the godly soul. So, number one is, what makes it a godly soul? Why is it godly? It totally nullifies to God, pure and holy and divine, part of the divine. Where do we find that? Where does that come from? So, when the Torah speaks about the birth of man, which it says that all Jewish souls were included in a man, in Adam Rishon. Birth of Adam Rishon, the creation of Adam Rishon. And that's all Jewish souls. Later, after the sin of eating from the forbidden fruit, did other souls get incorporated into Adam, and that's where the whole rest of the nations come from. But when he was originally created, he only had to include within himself Eden. So the pasuk says, "Vayipach ba'abav nishmas chaim," which means God blew a spirit of life into his nostrils. He blew. And we say the same thing every morning. We say, Va'ata nafachta. Hashem, you blew into me a life, a soul. What does it mean blow? What does the blow mean? See, the rest of creation, every other part of creation, it doesn't use the expression blow. It uses the expression speech. Ba'asara ma'amaris nivra. God said, let there be light. There was light. God said, let there be grass, earth, and so on, and there was. All other things were created through speech, whereas the Jewish soul, it uses the expression of blowing. What's the difference between blowing and speaking? The one difference is that you can speak, and some people can speak today till tomorrow. They don't get tired. It's not a problem. Whereas blowing, try to blow a few balloons after 10 or less, you're tired. Why? Because blowing uses up inner energy. It's from your innermost energy. Whereas you're exerting yourself, you're giving more of yourself. Whereas speaking is more external. So what that tells us is that whereas the rest of the world is all from the external energy of God, it's speech, created for speech, it's external energy. External part of God. And that, by the way, includes not just the physical world that we see. That includes our animal soul. That's part of creation. That includes angels, the highest of angels. They are not souls. If you're not a Jewish soul, if you're not a godly soul, then you're all from speech. The only place it says blowing is by this unique godly soul, because it comes from the internal part of Hashem. It's a godly soul. We also find another term that's used for the Jew, or for the godly soul, which is not used by anything else, not the highest of angels, and that is banim. Banim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem. You are children to Hashem, your God. We're called the son of Hashem, the children of Hashem. There's different expressions. Banim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem, b'ni b'chei Yisrael, you're my son, you're my firstborn. In numerous verses, the Jewish people are referred to as the children of God. That's not a term that's used anywhere else. And we know by the child comes to the essence of the father, or the parent. In fact, Chassidus proves, where do we see that the child comes from the deepest part of the parent? Because you can have a parent who, God forbid, is blind, deaf, or any other handicap, and the child can be born with perfectly healthy. Why? Why is the child born perfectly healthy? Because a child comes from a deeper level than where all the issues are. The issues are all on an external level. But on a deeper level, every soul is complete. Every soul is wholesome. And the child comes from that deeper level. And therefore, he can be totally wholesome and healthy, although the parent is not. So a child comes to the essence of the parent. And the Jewish people are called the children of Hashem, shows that we come from this essence. We have a godly son. Something that's produced from God. And that's true about every Jew. For Moses and Avraham Avinu, all the way down to someone who doesn't even know that they're Jews. Someone who's a sinner. Someone who's, a murderer. Makes no difference. If they're a Jew, they have this soul. It's godly soul. So then the question might be, well, if we're all coming from the same source, from the inner part of Hashem, how is it that we have so many different levels of Jews? For Moses and prophets, and King David and all these holy people, all the way down to the lowest. Where does that division happen? Where does that separate? Where do all these levels come from? If we're all coming from the innermost part of Hashem, we should all be Moshe. We should all be Moses. All have this godly soul. Where does that division come from? So the author gives an analogy. He says it's like a child that's born from a parent. So he says the child is developed from the seed of the father. Now, that seed of the father will develop into a full-on child. That child will have a brain, will have eyes, will also have hands, feet, all the way down to toenails. And all of it comes from the same seed. So how did the same seed become a brain, and eyes, the most sophisticated part of a person, a heart, and toenails? How did that happen? From the same seed, getting all these different levels, from one extreme to the other. So he said, well, it's simple. Because that seed sits in the womb of the mother for 9 months. And during these 9 months, it develops, and it goes lower and lower. The higher limbs, organs, are developed right away. The brain is in the early weeks, early months for sure. Because that has less development. It has less, it stays truer to its original source. As Chassidus explains it, that seed of the father actually originates from the brain. Not physically, but at least the energy of the brain is in that seed. So the early parts don't have to develop so much. The higher parts, ask any doctor, obstetrician, they'll tell you the earlier parts, the higher parts, the brain, the heart, these things are earlier stages. So the later you are in the pregnancy, the more the external things are developing, to the point that the latest thing is nails and hair. And that's why if a kid goes a little bit longer than usual, they might have longer nails and longer hair, more hair, because these are developed all the way at the end. That means they made the biggest journey from the original seed all the way to big nails. And that happened in 9 months. It's a journey. It evolved to become such a low part of the person. But nevertheless, they all come from the same place. They all have the same source, that original seed. The same is true by the Jewish people. We all have the same source. We all come from Hashem. But there's a process of pregnancy, which in the spiritual, physically, it's the mother's womb. But in the spiritual realm, the development of a soul goes through a pregnancy, but it's 4 spiritual worlds that has to go through. It has to travel through 4 spiritual worlds until this physical world. And that's the pregnancy. Some souls are not affected by the journey. They remain true to their original source. And they come through the rest of the pregnancy unaffected. Like a brain. Similar to a brain. The brain is only developed in the early months. I don't know exactly how much time, but it's early stages. And then the rest of the way it's just going along. It's not affected. So that's some souls. They're not affected by the whole journey down. They just remain true to their source. Whereas other souls get affected by the second spiritual world. They're very much affected by that, impacted by that. They take on that identity, but then the rest of the journey goes smooth and they're unaffected. And some souls get affected by every step of the way, to the point that even the lowest level has an impact on it. So they come down here, they're very desensitized, similar to a nail, where you can cut it off. It's part of the body, you can cut it and you don't feel it. Or hair, if you cut it, you don't feel it. So some souls go all the way that far down. But nevertheless, they all stem, they all originate from the same place. They all have the same source. It's just how developed, how low did they come down during their journey. But we all have the same source, which is we're rooted in Hashem, and therefore we all have a godliness. We're talking about the godliness. We all have a godliness. We finished up to chapter 2. We're going to go to chapter 2. I'll take a few questions, but this is up to here, the summary of last week, and today we finished chapter 2. Yes.
Just interested, why would some souls be affected by each of the worlds so much? Why would one soul have a smooth transition and others?
You can ask the question by children. Why is it that some children hang around a good crowd and they're totally affected? They take it all in, and others are just not affected. Why? Could be the person's a higher type of person. They don't fall for such silly behavior. They have natural wisdom about them that doesn't go for this. So some souls are higher. They're just higher. And they're not affected. They're not intimidated. It doesn't pull them down. And other souls are lower. So you're saying what decides whether it's a higher soul or a lower soul? That's one of those things that we can't. It's referred to as a lottery in Chassidus. It's a lottery. It's something that's hot. Not a lottery because it's random. A lottery because lottery means that I can't decide with my mind what to do, so I'm going to make a lottery. That's what a lot is. It's the idea it's higher than understanding because I can't clearly get to a conclusion. So it's something that's higher than our understanding. But each soul has its journey. And it goes through this. It's not a bad thing that happened. It's its unique journey. Some souls are down here, like by Moshe. It says, but it's written that by all of the tzaddikim, a lot of times you have their name mentioned twice in the Torah, right next to each other. Like God says to Abraham, Avraham. And Avraham answers, Hineni, I'm here. So between Avram and Avram, there's a line. If you look in your Chumash, you'll see there's a little line between the first Avram and the second. And likewise, by any of the other prophets or biblical personalities that are called out by God and meant the name is mentioned twice, there's going to be a little line in between the two. Check it. See. The only one that doesn't have that line is Moshe Rabbeinu. When God says Moshe, there's no line. So Chassidus explains why the difference. Because all of these righteous people, as holy as they were, there's a difference between Avraham, the way he's in his source, and Avraham, the way he comes down here. Avram, the first name, Avram refers to Avram in his source. And Avram, the second one, is the way he is here. There's a line in between. It's not the same. He's not on the same level as he was in his source. Moshe is the only person who, in this world, lived exactly the way he was in his source. He was a walking soul, a walking highest level of soul. No, the fact that he was in this planet, on this world, made no difference to him whatsoever. So, the fact that Moshe had that ability, and others are totally affected, that's all from Hashem. Hashem decides, Moshe Rabbeinu, he has to be the leader of the Jewish people, he has to bring the Torah, that's his turn. Other people are totally affected, they come to this world, and every temptation is a big deal for them. They're very affected by the physical world around them, and it's hard for them to get spiritual and get into a relationship with God, but that's part of their journey. That's part of what they have to achieve, to refine the lower levels, to battle with lower things. And we're all, even a little ant is part of building this perfect world for God. Every part of creation how much more so a soul? We're all building a beautiful world for God, and each one of us has our part, and according to that would be the type of soul we do. So that's up to chapter 2. Now that we understand that there are two souls within a person, and we understand a little more about the godly soul, about what it is in essence, it's a holy, selfless drive to connect to godliness, and we spoke about its pure source. Then the author moves on in chapter 3 to explain the structure of the godly soul. What is a soul? We understand its drive. This soul's drive is selflessness for God. But what does a soul look like? When you say soul, what do you mean? So he explains that a soul is made up of 10 soul powers, 10 faculties, 10 energies. It's made up of 10. And this is really mirrors the spiritual, the 10 spheroids. If anyone ever studied Hasidus or Kabbalah, they heard of the 10 spheroids, which is the makeup of every spiritual world, 10 spheres. The soul, it mirrors that. The soul has 10 spheres. And these 10 soul levels are divided into 2. Intellectual and emotional. The first 3 are intellectual. They're called Chabad. Chabad is Chabad. First 3 because it's into using the intellect in service of God. So first 3 are intellectual. The next 7 are the emotional. The intellectual are called mothers. The emotions are called children.
Sorry, those 3 are intellectual.
And the last 7 are emotional. So a soul basically is intellect and emotion. And the 3 intellectual are inspiration, integration, and application. That's how intellect works. I'm not going to go in depth with that now. It's for a more in-depth type of class. But those are the 3 intellectual ones: inspiration, integration, and emotion. You start off with an inspiration in your mind, and you have to integrate it so that you understand it. And then you have to apply it. So those are the intellectual ones. And they're called mothers because they produce emotions. Emotions are love or fear. Those are the 2 main emotions, which means attraction or rejection. Emotion, the word emotion comes through motion, which means in which motion does it set you? Are you coming closer to the thing, or do you feel repelled by that thing? Those are the 2 main emotions. Intellect doesn't really care about, it's not my relationship with that thing, it's more about just understanding the thing. It's more separate and objective. Emotion is all about how do I relate now to that thing, which I thought about. So there's 2 main emotions, attraction and rejection. To come closer or to feel distance. And the third emotion is a blend of the 2. Balancing the 2. Knowing how to respect and love together, how to keep your distance and yet come close. The balance between the 2 is the third. And the rest of the 4 are really details in the first 3. But these 7 emotions are children of the intellect. Because based on what you meditate about, if you sit and meditate about the fact that water is the healthiest thing you can possibly drink, and how it's all the benefits of water, then you're likely to now feel an attraction to water. Love. Not love the way, but that's chesed, love, and attraction to water. And if you start to think about how destructive Coca-Cola is, and you sit and meditate and you realize how much sugar they put in it and what kind of other trash is inside there, you're likely to feel a rejection, to reject Coca-Cola. That would be the second emotion. Whatever you use your mind with, whatever you think about, that will produce emotions. And that's a soul. A soul is intellect and emotion. That's the structure of a soul. So here we're talking about a godly soul. It's all about God. It's in love with God. That's all it wants, nothing else. So it uses its mind, what's the intellect, to think about the greatness of God, the kindness of God. Its mind is totally dedicated towards meditating on godly things. Hence, its emotions become emotions towards God. Love for God, awe of God, and so on. That's the structure of the godly soul. In chapter 4, Dr. Rebbe says that there's another aspect to a soul. That's the general structure of the soul, intellect and emotion. But then comes another part of the soul, and that is garments, clothes. Just like our bodies, we need to wear clothes. The soul wears clothes. That's clothes. What are the clothes of the soul? So in other words, just like we wear clothes and we express ourselves with our clothes. People wear, a policeman wears a police uniform, and a fireman wears a fire uniform. But even without that, a person, the way they dress, you can see a lot about who they are. You express yourself through your clothes. So the soul expresses itself through its clothes, its garments. What are the garments of the soul? Thought, speech, and action. It can think about things, it can speak about things, and it can do things. Those are garments of the soul. Why are they not the soul itself? Why are they only the clothes of the soul?
Not its essence.
Yeah. Why is it not the essence?
Because there are many things to express.
Why is that not part of the essence?
External.
Why is it
Me
external?
doing this is not me.
Oh, okay, why? Why is that not you?
It's just something I'm doing.
Okay. All right. So good. Let me just say a little along the lines of what you're saying. But the point is that you could do something that you don't believe in at all, that you don't believe in, you totally disagree with, and you don't feel for. You can say something that you don't believe in, you don't agree with, and you don't feel for. And you can even think something that you don't agree with or feel for. Let's take an example, 2 + 2 = 5, right? Your mind would never agree with that. Never. Nevertheless, I can think in my mind, 2 + 2 = 5. Say those words in my mind. I could definitely speak it, and I can write on a piece of paper, 2 + 2 = 5. Why? Because it's very external. It's not me. It doesn't have much of an effect on me. So therefore, I can do it, and it doesn't make a difference. And the same with emotions. You could really not like someone and tell them that you really care about them. I'm not talking about that you don't care and you say that you care. You can't stand them. Your emotions are boiling with anger towards them, and you can smile at them and say to them that they mean a lot to you, or try to help. Or you can do an action that's a favorable action towards them. Your garments don't express you. They're external to you. Much like a person. So you can wear whatever clothes you want to wear. You can change and put on whatever clothes you want with ease. It's not hard, no challenge, because it's external. It's not a real change. But when we come to intellect, like if you have a certain attitude in life, a certain opinion in life, which you really believe in, and you want to try to change a person's opinion, you can't just switch it like that. It's a long-term thing. You have to sit and spend time with them and explain to them and discuss. And after a long time, you might make a real change inside. It takes a long time because this is a real change. And if you make a change, it's a change. It's a change. It lasts. They change their opinion or emotions. If you don't like someone, you want to work on it. You can't just command yourself, or someone can't command you now love them. No, because this is you. This is real. It's a long-term thing. It's a lot of effort, a lot of time. And after a lot of effort and time, you might succeed at changing the emotion. And if you did, then you are changed. You're a different person. Now you're okay with that person. You get along with them. Or now you like this type of activity. But these are real changes. Garments are external. Thought, speech, and action are external. It takes no effort. You can do change with these. So just to finish the point, and I'll take questions. So when we talk about the godly soul, it's not just a structure of intellect and emotion, but it also has tools at its disposal to express itself. Thought, speech, and action. So what's the thought, speech, and action of the godly soul? Thinking words of Torah and thinking things that have to do with service of God, speaking words of Torah, speaking, doing mitzvahs, and so on, and doing in action, doing mitzvahs. It uses its garments, or she, the soul is in the feminine, she uses her garments only to do godly things. The Nefesh Elokis, all it wants to do is think, speak, and do what Hashem wants. Totally in line with Torah. That's its whole passion. That's what it's all about. That's what it thinks about. That's what it loves. And that's what it wants to do. Meaning to think, speak, and do. When I say do, it really means all three of them. Because what thinking is also an action. What you feel is not an action. That's just who you are. But when you think is an action, you're doing and speaking for sure and action. So that's the godly soul. It has 10 faculties, 10 soul powers, intellect and emotion, and it has clothes, which it expresses itself with. And all of those are purely dedicated towards Hashem. So, obviously, the same would apply with the animal soul that has the 10 soul powers and the 3 garments, but we're not going to go there yet. Any questions?
Just when you were talking about like struggling with a feeling towards someone that you don't necessarily get along with, but you can change that feeling over time. Of course, that's regardless of how they're acting. It's just changing it inside yourself.
Yeah. It's working on yourself. If it's about how they're acting, then it has nothing to do with inner changes, them changing. You're just reacting.
What about if it really, like, sort of, in terms of values, if it's about having difficulty with the fact that the other person has completely different values to you, and that's the struggle. It's not necessarily done.
So it's agree to disagree. I mean, it's the ability to understand how a person, yes, that would be inner work for a person to work on their emotions, that they come to realize that there are other people and other ways of seeing things, or work on their attitudes. You know, it says that there's the world of, this speaks about the world of Tayu and the world of Tikkun. There's 2 spiritual worlds, not what we spoke about today, but one of them, they both have the whole set of 10, the emotions, but in one of them, the emotions don't get on with each other at all. In other words, the kind guy is only kindness and cannot agree with the strict guy at all, because he only knows kindness and extreme. The strict guy is the enemy. And the same is true, every emotion doesn't get along with each other. Then there's the world of Tikkun. And the world of Tikkun is where kindness is kindness. But it understands that there's also time for strictness. He might not be the strict guy, but he leaves room for the strict guy. So, that's all inner work.
So if you have the word tikkun, what is that one? What tikkun?
Tohu.
Tov?
Tohu vavohu.
Tov.
Yes. Okay, so just want to finish off for today because we're a bit over time. Just the last point. Says the Alter Rebbe, if you were to look at it and ask, which one is higher, the soul or the garments of the soul? The way I feel, my intellect, or my thought, speech, and action? Which one is higher? Which one's more important? So you would think that the soul is more important because that's the soul, whereas the garments are just garments, they're external. So the Alter Rebbe know the opposite is true. The garments are infinitely higher, not just higher. They're infinitely higher than the soul. Why? And this is a very important lesson in life also at this point. Why? Because the soul, as high as it may be, even if you have the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, at the end of the day, it's not God. It comes from God. It's a godly soul, but it's not God. The garments are God. Why are the garments God? Because the garments, the thought, speech, and action of the soul, is thinking and speaking and doing Torah and mitzvahs. You're studying Torah and you're fulfilling mitzvahs. And God put his essence into Torah and mitzvahs. In the first word of the Ten Commandments, the first word is Anoichi. Anoichi is an acronym for Ano Nafshi Ksavis Yehovos. God says, I put my soul into my writings. So God is in Torah and God is in mitzvahs. So the soul could be a lofty soul, but it's not God. It comes from God, it's holy, but it's not God. Torah and mitzvahs are God. God's inside it. So when the soul decides to think words of Torah or to do mitzvahs, right now it's connecting with God himself. It's lifting the soul way higher than it is on its own. The soul is a soul, but their garments elevate it because they when they're used for Torah mitzvahs, they're internalizing God. They're one with God. Through mitzvahs, the Alter Rebbe explains, the mitzvahs are more clothes for the soul. So you're clothing your soul with godliness. And through Torah, Torah is food for the soul. When you study Torah, just like you eat and you digest, the brain eats the words of Torah and digests Torah, which in there is godliness. So it's food for the soul. You're internalizing godliness when you study Torah. So Torah is even higher than mitzvahs. As he explains in the details over there. But the main point is that what he's saying over a novel idea is that the garments, the things that you do with your godly soul are a lot more important than the soul itself. They're a lot higher. So you have some people that come and say, I love godliness. I love Judaism. I don't put on tefillin and I don't do practical mitzvahs. Because I'm not into the external expression of it, but I'm a Jew in my heart and I really feel it. And here we're saying, that's fantastic. You have a Jewish soul and you're a Jew in your heart. But that's nothing compared to one mitzvah that you do. If you take a coin and put it in a charity box, or if a man puts on tefillin, or a woman lights Shabbos candles, or you eat a matzah, you're just crunching on a cracker on the right night of Pesach, then that will take your soul infinitely higher than it was with all its great feelings about God and all its spirituality. It pales in comparison to one mitzvah. Because one mitzvah is God. God is in the mitzvahs, and he's in the Torah. So with this, we finished chapter 5. We've described the godly soul, what its drive is, and its structure, its garments, how it expresses itself, and how the garments actually lift the godly soul much higher than it is on its own. What we have to do now, God will want to do tomorrow, is zoom in the animal soul, other drive inside us, and understand its structure a little better. Then we'll have to move on to the battle and how they confront each other. Now that we understand more about them, we'll be able to understand how they fight, what the battle is, and how we can be victorious. About 10 minutes, we'll continue with the sequence, about 5 past 10.
Good morning, Leah.
I just.
So it's really nice to be back here. I'll introduce myself for those of you that don't know who I am. My name is Rabbi Slavin, and I'm one of the shluchim in Chabad Malvern, which is just on the other side of Denmark Road, not too far from here. I've taught here a number of times, most of the time filling in for Rabbi Hoch when he can't make it, but over this week I'm going to be doing 3 classes. So today we're doing a class on happiness, and the next one is appropriate. Okay, good. The next one is going to be a class on Halacha and health, but in fact we're going to talk about cosmetic surgery or plastic surgery from a halachic perspective. That one is either Tuesday or, well, I'm not sure. I'll have to look on my calendar. I'll tell you after the class. And then we're going to do one on relationships on the third one. So today's class is obviously about happiness, and today's class is going to be text and discussion based. So it's just a number of texts I put together from different sources, many different places that have all been in old-fashioned style, copy-pasted, and then copy-pasted, and then made into a booklet. So we're going to begin. Do you mind if we actually go around the class reading? Are people okay reading? We'll go around. If you want to read. If you want to skip to the person next to you, go ahead. So the first text we're going to begin today's class with is from Rabbi Bachia, and it's from a very famous work called the Chayvus Halavavas, Duties of the Heart. And here he's going to give us a mashal. So if you're okay to start reading, read in English. It'll be much quicker and much safer. And then we'll continue. Yeah. Maybe next time.
There was once an infant found in the desert by a kind-hearted individual. The benevolent man took pity on the child, carried him to his home, brought him up, fed him, clothed him, and fed him generously with all that was good, until the child was old enough to understand and comprehend the many benefits he had received. The same benefactor heard of a man who had fallen into the hands of his enemy and had, for a long time, been treated with extreme cruelty, starved, and kept naked. The benevolent man's compassion was aroused. He appeased the enemy and convinced him to free the prisoner and forgive his debt, and he brought the man to his home. The kindness that he showed this man was a fraction of the kindness he showed the child.
So the question Rabbeinu Bachia asks after this mashal, after this parable, is which rescued individual is going to be more appreciative to their rescuer?
The one who came from more suffering.
The one who came from more suffering. Which one is that? Can you identify who came from more suffering in the text?
The second one.
So you say the second one. Anyone disagree? So you say the adult. Anyone disagree?
As in, they both came from suffering, just one didn't know it because they were.
So Rabbeinu Bachia argues that the adult is going to likely be more appreciative. Although the adults received less, since the adult at the time of the good that was done to him, he was a mature individual. Therefore, as a mature individual, he fully appreciates the kindness that was done for him. True, the infant received a greater level of kindness, but the infant didn't realize the value and the level of the kindness he was receiving. And even Rabbeinu Bachia argues that even when this child is going to grow older, he's going to see these favors, he's going to appreciate them, but he's going to take them for granted. What is the message that Rabbeinu Bachia is trying to convey with this parable? He's talking about happiness, and he says as follows. He says, as human beings, we enter the world. Most of the time, we enter the world breathing. We learn to walk. We learn to talk. Most of the time, we have caring parents. So as a human being, we're automatically brought into a world that is giving us much goodness and kindness. And therefore, automatically, we would think that that should give us much happiness. He says it doesn't. Even when we mature, like the child, we fail to focus on these gifts, and we take it for granted. There's an interesting essay, some of you may have heard of Helen Keller. And in a famous essay, which she calls 3 Days to See, she says, in this essay, she writes, what would she do if she had 3 days of her eyesight being restored. But towards the end of this essay, she makes a very, very powerful statement. So let's go inside the next text from Helen Keller, and let's see just an excerpt of this essay.
Only the deaf appreciate hearing, only the blind realize the manifold blessings that lie in sight. Particularly does this observation apply to those who have lost sight and hearing in adult life. But those who have never suffered impairment of sight or hearing seldom make the fullest use of these blessed faculties. Their eyes and ears take in all sights and sounds hazily without concentration and with little appreciation. It is the same old story of not being grateful for what we have until we lose it, of not being conscious of health until we are ill.
Continue on the other side.
I have often thought it would be a blessing if each human being was stricken blind and deaf for a few days at some time during his early adult life. Darkness would make him more appreciative of sight. Silence would teach him the joys of sound. Recently, I was visited by a very good friend who had just returned from a long walk in the woods, and I asked her what she had observed. Nothing in particular, she replied. I might have been incredulous had I not been accustomed to such responses, for long ago I became convinced that the seeing see little.
So she's telling us that when we are born into something, we obviously take it for granted, and we become accustomed to it. So something that we take for granted and something that we're accustomed to will fail to make us happy. It's interesting that there's a medrash on Koheles. So Koheles was written by Shlomo HaMelech, and the medrash on Koheles tells us an interesting statement which is similar to on the topic of what we're discussing today. So that's the next text we have in front of us.
No person leaves this world with even half of his desires fulfilled. When we have 100, we want to make of it 200. When we have 200, we want to make it 400. As we acquire income...
So we'll stop there for 1 second. So that is the medrash on Koheles. Okay? In general, Koheles is talking all about the concept of human beings coming in here into this world, and the more we acquire, the less we're happy. And it's Shlomo HaMelech at the end of his life, lamenting his whole life, that as a king, he talks about physical acquisitions, he talks about chachma, all that he acquired, and yet at the end of life, what do you have to talk about? So that's from the Medrash on Koheles. Let's go to a next text, which is from a modern psychologist, and they're going to cite an interesting study similar to this Medrash on Koheles. So we'll move on, Leah. We'll do the next one.
So not that as we
as we require. Continue. Yeah.
As we acquire income and consumer goods that we desire, e.g., gadgets, computers, cars, homes, swimming pools, our aspirations simply rise to the same degree, thereby trapping us in a hedonic treadmill. In one study that surveyed people over a 36-year period, respondents were asked how much income was needed by a family of four to get along. The higher the person's income, the more they estimated was required for the family of four. Remarkably, the estimate for get along income increased almost exactly to the same degree as in actual income, suggested that the more you have, the more you can.
And let's continue the next text, a continuation.
All of us can experience the emotional highs that come with buying a new car or reading a child's outstanding report card. And each of us is familiar with the emotional thoughts that come with a chronic illness. Remodeling the house or getting arrested, okay? Well, maybe only a few of us are familiar with getting arrested. But ask yourself, why don't you stay that way? Why aren't you as happy today as you were on the day of your promotion at work, or sad as you were on the day of your grandmother died? It's not simply because new events, both happy and sad, have occurred in your life. It's because you adopt to the new condition over time. This is why so many folks seek out novel experience, look forward to the change of the pace, or develop new goals once all wants have been met. We tend to react to changes and then quickly adjust to the new circumstances.
So these texts are explaining to us human nature of wanting more. We experience an emotional spike when we experience something new. But new, by definition, cannot last forever, because then it's no longer new. So new ultimately becomes the new norm, becomes the normal. But we don't always find happiness with the normal. So we look for the new. And this cycle never ends. That's the hedonic treadmill that we're talking about. But if we go back to originally what the Medrash is telling us, is that wanting more is not an outcome of lack of happiness. It's not that a person is experiencing unhappiness, and then, by the way, the reason why we're saying this so confidently of experiencing happiness is because studies are showing today that compared to the 1960s, although, say, for example, in the UK, where the national wealth has tripled, depression has tripled as well. In the United States, I'm not so sure about Australian numbers, but around the world, the richer we are, the less happier we are becoming. And this is based on a course that Tal Ben Shachar, who was an Israeli psychologist who gave a course on positive psychology. This is a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today, not necessarily from the Jewish perspective, but from the psychological perspective, is coming from it. But what we're learning over here is that it's not that we are unhappy and wanting more is, because of our lack of happiness. The actual emotion, the actual idea, the thoughts of wanting more is causing the lack of happiness. Because if we are constantly in this level of thinking we want more, then our mind is always focused on what we don't have. So we lose the chance to focus on what we already have, to gain happiness from it, and instead, what we're constantly thinking is, I want more. That's a definition, because that by definition is a negative, because if I'm thinking I want more, it's obviously a feeling that I'm lacking something. So let's go a bit further. We'll go back to another text now from the Chayvus Halavavis, Rabbi Hoch B'Pekuda, and let's see what he says in the next text. Yep, people neglect.
People forget what contains that is so competent that the soul information uses is practices that should be desire and fulfill their wish. Every stage of success in the seek and
So Rabbi Hoch here is arguing that we fail to take notice and enjoy our blessings because we're busy wanting more. Therefore, wanting more is the roadblock to happiness. And that's the real issue. Minds and hearts that are focused on what we don't have are not only a roadblock to happiness, they are a bridge to unhappiness. They are not only a result of unhappiness, they are the cause of unhappiness, which is kind of a different spin to how we may have seen it up until now. So what's it worth sitting here for such a long time talking about the problem? Let's think about talking about the solution a little bit. And we'll begin with an interesting text from a mimer from the Rebbe Rashab. Just an introduction to this text. We know that in Kabbalah, the world is divided into 4 levels. We have Doime, which is the inanimate. We have Tzomeach, which is the vegetable kingdom. We have Chai, which is the animal kingdom. And we have Medaber, which are human beings. Interesting, from other perspectives, it's really just 3. And the human being is the Chai, but just a sophisticated animal. Where in the Kabbalah, there's a clear difference. There's Chai, there's the animal kingdom, and there's human beings. But interestingly, from all descriptions to give the human being, it uses the word midaber, the fact that we are articulate. So obviously, there's something very powerful about human speech. There's something very powerful about the fact that we are able to articulate ourselves. If we think about speech for a moment, the Rebbe Rashab looks at speech from the negative, and then he takes it to the positive. So let's give an example. So you're walking down the street one day, and this tremendous chachma pops into your mind. Whether it was a business idea, an idea on how you're going to save world hunger, how you're going to save homelessness in Australia, how you're going to save the Jewish, continuity of the Jewish. It's an amazing idea, whatever it is. This is a family idea, whatever pops into your mind. So you run home and you want to tell it to your best friend. So you get on the phone or you go to your best friend and you start giving your idea to your friend. And you're just getting a blank stare. Your friend is just looking at you and they're just giving you blanks and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. This makes no sense. And then you think to yourself, you say, really in my mind, it made much more sense. In my mind, this chachma was very, very clear. The problem is once I started to articulate myself, once I started speaking about it, the speech really obscured this idea and I lost it. It's really just lost. I can't articulate, I can't explain it. Speech being the keli of the oir, the vessel of the light, of the chachma, it just wasn't able to contain it and it wasn't able to express it adequately. That's from the negative. But speech also has a tremendous positive. You have the same story. You're walking down the street and the chachma pops into your mind, whatever it is, but it's really unclear. It's like chachma is like the whole idea, it's in pre-embryo state, it's there, it's like a puzzle, but then the puzzle shattered, the pieces of the puzzle are all in your mind, but you just don't know how to put the puzzle back together. So you sit down in front of your friend, or you get on the phone and you start talking about it, and all of a sudden you start talking about it, the chachma starts making sense. The putting a language, putting words to this idea, maybe some questions back and forth to explain yourself. Once you start using your speech to explain your chachma, now it's really starting to make sense, it's clarified, and it's crystallizing. This is all in regards to intellect. The Rebbe Rashab calls it Or Chayzer, the concept that speech has the power to take that chachma and to really help you crystallize it, then re-enters your mind so much clearer and more crystallized. Here in this text, we're going to talk about this from an emotional perspective as well. How speaking, not just about something, a chachma, but speaking about a midah, speaking about emotions, also help intensify the emotions. So let's go inside the Rebbe Rashab and let's read a text from a mimer of the Rebbe Rashab. Should we read that in English as well? I mean, everyone can read it on themselves. They all have it. Here, well, I'll read it. When a person pours his feelings of love into words, we don't have. There's no English.
Isn't that what
No. So you only have the Hebrew there. I didn't put in the English. Okay, I'll read it. I have the English in front of me. When a person speaks words of love, shahadiber mikabel oz limidas ahava shebenafshay. The act of speaking these words fuels and intensifies the love. Hine anuroyin shahadiber moisif ba'ava. Through speaking about it, the emotional energy radiates with more passion. Sha'yidei shemedaber ba meir ba ha'er ha'ava b'yoser u'mispal b'yoser b'nafshay ba'ava v'chiba la'dabrahu. And the person is aroused with more love and fondness for the object of love. V'cheinu b'chol hamidos. Kishe'enim boim b'dibur. The same applies to all emotions when they are not expressed through speech. Yiskatin v'yismai tispilus. They are reduced until they completely dissipate. V'yismai tispil hamidos ad shemis'almim legamrei. Ulehepech al yidei sheboim b'dibur misrabim u'misrachim b'yoser. When they are expressed verbally, they augment and grow considerably. So whatever Rashad is saying is when a person has an emotion, by not expressing that emotion, the emotion becomes less, or by expressing that emotion verbally, the emotion becomes stronger. The example is telling someone, feeling love towards someone. When we actually say the words, I love you, where the actual feeling within us grows. And I heard a story. So we're talking about appreciating things we have, right? So it's a terrible story. Unfortunately, a young man loses his wife. So by the funeral, he comes to the rabbi officiating the funeral, and he's crying. He says, I really loved her. I really, really loved her. And I think I told it to her once. So the concept of speech here, the Rebbe Rashad is telling us, is by focusing and especially talking about the good in our lives, we foster happy emotions. It's interesting that this is something that's becoming very popular in the world today. You go onto Facebook, you'll see in social media, you have people all about happiness diaries, or you have this concept of, I know someone in our Chabad house started it. I've seen it with their friends on Facebook before they go to bed every night. They post about something they're appreciative or happy about or something positive. But from a Jewish perspective, this is something that is ingrained within us from such a long time ago. And the more we focus on it and the more we talk about it, the more intense these happy feelings grow and glow. And from a Jewish perspective, we have a built-in system for this. It's called Hakarat Toiva, recognizing the good. And in fact, it expresses itself in various different mitzvahs. Let's use one example of Bikurim. The mitzvah of Bikurim. Go ahead.
Can you help me? No, it's fine. I don't know.
Feel free. If anyone has any questions, go ahead. There's no rules.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
That's an example of happiness.
That's example of embarrassment.
Why? I'm laughing. No.
No questions?
Somebody, okay. Ask a question. Easy.
What question?
I don't know.
What is the
She wants someone to ask a question. Anyone has questions? Oh, so this is really punch drunk love. Okay, great. So let's use the example of Bikurim. There's an interesting. So the mitzvah of Bikurim is that the Jewish people will settle the land. There's a machlekes whether the mitzvah was given after 14 years after Yeshua conquered the land, or even before the land was conquered, whether, because the Torah uses the words your land, your fruits, and the first fruit was always brought, the first fruit of the season of the harvest was always brought to the Beis HaMikdash. Interestingly, in the text of the Torah that the Jewish farmer would say upon bringing the Bikurim, upon bringing the first fruits to the Beis HaMikdash, it's a very interesting text that they use, similar to that which we have in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. Aram Yoivdes Avi, it's this whole text about how Yaakov came to Mitzrayim, and how the Shvatim came to Mitzrayim. It then talks about the slavery in Mitzrayim. It then talks about the Nisim, the miracles in Mitzrayim. It then talks about leaving Mitzrayim and coming to Eretz Yisrael. Very interesting thing to be speaking about once you're already in the land of Israel, bringing the Bikurim, the first fruits, to the Beis HaMikdash. And interesting to note that if we're talking about 14 years we're talking about 40 years traveling in the desert, 14 years into Yeshua conquering the land, and then more time for the actual harvest of coming to the Beis HaMikdash, the farmers that were going to be bringing the fruit to the Beis HaMikdash would have nothing to do directly to Yetzias Mitzrayim. They definitely would not have been slaves in Mitzrayim. They wouldn't have been the generation. They could have been people that were, born close to entering the land of Israel, born in Eretz Yisrael. The miracles happened way before their times. Comes the Mefarshim, and they explain, the Mefarshim on the Torah, that that's exactly the point. Since the miracles would have happened way before their time, there's a chance that this next generation of Jewish people living in Eretz Yisrael, it would go unnoticed. They wouldn't have no concept about it. It would just have been something they heard about the past. And therefore, the Torah, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, commands the Jewish people to express the gratitude for these miracles. Indeed, the concept of bringing the actual Bikurim, and in word, by actually verbalizing all the way back from Arami Ovidus Avi, all the way from the time of Yaakov coming down to Mitzrayim. And ultimately, that would bring an expression of gratitude throughout the rest of their lives. By the way, if you go into the Pasuk, the continuation of the Pasuk is, and you shall rejoice in all the good that your God has given you and your family. What's the connection? Now we can understand a bit of the concluding Pasuk in the Bikurim. Here you have farmers that are coming. They're expressing their gratitude in deed and in word. That's why the Pasuk concludes, and you shall rejoice in the good that your God has given you. Meaning to say, once you express the gratitude that you have, then the rejoice comes. Without expressing it, indeed and in action, then it's the samachta b'chol asher toiv. So when reading the pasuk without this introduction, it just seems like it's this automatic continuation. But with this introduction, we're understanding that this pasuk, the final pasuk in Bikurim, is actually a result. Expressing your gratitude indeed and in action will result of then you will rejoice in that which you have, because you've recognized it, you've paused, you've stopped to take it all in. And although the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed, the concept of Bikurim still exists. According to some opinions, davening that we have today actually resembles is based from the Bikurim. Let's read that in a text from the Medrash.
Also, that the temple would be destroyed and the offering of first fruits would cease. He took initiative and ordained that the Jewish people should pray to and him.
So it's interesting to note that, by the way, some people say it's actually based on the three karbanos, the carbon tamid, that's Shacharis, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. The Rebbe Teres Menachem says that it's also more, it's particularly to take the place of the Bikurim.
I'm lost. I don't got pages missing. Yeah. Oh, okay, so we're back to Moses.
You're back to Moses, yeah. I told you I was old-fashioned. I did a bit of cutting and pasting, so it might be a little bit confusing. Most people see davening as a time to plead and ask. That's, by the way, that's the issue with translating tefillah as prayer. Because if you go into the dictionary and you look up the word prayer, prayer is seen as to plead, to ask, or to thank for something. That's where the Rebbe describes the problem with translating prayer, tefillah as prayer, teshuvah as repentance, tzedakah as charity. But not to get into that, but specifically in the concept of tefillah. Tefillah is it's a connection, but it's also a time to give gratitude. This is telling us something very important. Being grateful, expressing our gratitude, actually in return does more for us. Expressing our gratitude enhances our happiness level. So it's not only the favor to the individual, the menschlichkeit to say thank you, but being grateful in return is also a gift for us. Here's the problem. As human beings, we know that the human psyche is very resistant to being grateful. It's tough. There's a few things that's tough for us to say. It's tough for us to say, I'm sorry. But it's also, maybe for some people, easier than others. But for a lot of us, it's hard to be grateful. And if you're ever wondering why, we'll read in the next text is going to tell us why it's hard to be grateful.
We are not being reminded that we need your help. We don't want to be beholden to our Savior.
Gratitude received the challenge for this reasonable way. Gratitude can be a bitter pill to swallow, humbling us and demanding as it does that we confront our own sense of self-sufficiency. So we may avoid it as we avoid going to the doctor for the annual prosperity.
Being grateful means that I had to be dependent on someone else. As human beings, what makes us really fully developed human beings? When we're capable of being independent. Our independency, that's where we see our humanity. And that's why it's so hard to be grateful, because being grateful is basically telling me that I had to come to someone else's help. I was dependent on someone else, and that doesn't make me feel so good. So, we are very lucky that we have a different kind of harvest today. And the harvest that we have is first thing when we wake up in the morning. We dedicate a prayer of our gratefulness in life. And that's Moida Ani. Moida Ani, we don't realize, is everything that we've been speaking up until today. Moida Ani is the clue, and Moida Ani is the key. So, what I want to do is something a bit different. And it's something I came upon and I've done in the Chabad a few times, and it's a very powerful tool for Moida Ani. We may see Moida Ani differently than we've ever seen it before. So we're going to do a Moida Ani meditation on the first word of Moida Ani. Okay? So you can sit here around this table. You can continue how you're sitting, right? As if this is a class. Or you can do something else to make it more powerful. You with me on this?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're sitting, you put your 2 feet, plant your 2 feet on the ground. You straighten yourself up a little bit. And you put your hands on your knees or your hands on your waist, whichever is more comfortable. Okay? And you can close your eyes. And identify different sounds in the room. Identify them and recognize them and move on from them. So the first word of Moida Ani is Moida. First thing in the morning, you have woken up. You have opened your eyes and you realize you are alive. As a Jewish individual, automatically, your lips move and you say, Moide ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shechazarta bi nishmasi, chemla, rabba, emunasecha. The word moide, there are so many ways to translate moide. Many might have heard of the word todah, like todah rabbah. Todah means thank you. Toda and moide are the same root. The word is ode, thanks. But moide means a lot more than thank you. Moide also means to surrender, or to admit, or to acknowledge. This is very important to the universal human experience. There is tremendous internal tension going on in our lives. On the one hand, as soon as I wake up in the morning, I feel I am here. It's just a sense of I. There really isn't anything else. All that matters is that I woke up, I am breathing, I am here. But after that second of I, it may even be a fraction of a second of I or I-ness. You look around, you take a few more breaths, and you realize that there are other things going on. Other people. Things that I did not make happen. There's a whole world operating around me. I did not put this world here, someone else did. So there is an I, and there is a someone else. The natural, instinctual human response is, forget that other. It's just I. And if there is another out there, he or she better comply with my I. Because that's really, at the end of the day, what matters. But the moide in us is a sense that says, no, there is something higher than me. And I am only an agent of that higher existence, that higher reality. So I am moide. And the moide brings this argument, although the argument may have only taken a second, this inner turmoil, this inner conflict to an abrupt end. I am moide. On one level, I thank you. Thank you, Hashem, for the gift of life. Thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunities today brings. And most importantly, thank you for having faith in me that I will accomplish something worthwhile today. That it was worth my soul returning back into this physical world because there is something I need to do today that no one else can achieve. And this is only one word of the Moide Ani. Moide. Moide can mean thank you. Moide can mean I surrender. Moide can mean I admit. And Moide can mean I acknowledge. But all of them come back to the same thing. There's inner turmoil. There's inner conflict. There's I-ness. But there's a recognition that this I-ness is part of something much greater. A mission, a task to fulfill something today, and only today, and to fulfill something I, and only I, can accomplish, and no one else. Think about that for a few seconds. Slowly open your eyes, and get uncomfortable again. So Moide Ani, back to reality, I guess. So Moide Ani is that built-in hakaras hatoiv, that from a Jewish perspective, if we think about what we're saying, and that was, 10 minutes of just the first word. That was just Moide, never mind Ani. We could do this on the word Ani, we could do this on the word Lefanecha, we could do this on the word Melech. What is a king? Chai, what does it mean? Hashem's alive. We can do this on every single word, but if we think for a second that everything that popular culture is telling us, and everything that modern psychology is telling us, we from a Jewish perspective have a built-in system to this. Not only is there a built-in system in regards to the mitzvahs, in the way we conduct our lives, simply in the way we begin the very first second of our day. There's another point. In davening, we recite the word from Tehillim. We recite a verse from Tehillim. So let's continue reading in our text. The text starts, Kol HaNeshama. Where are we holding? Every
soul shall praise God.
Right? This is coming from Tehillim. We say this, every soul shall praise Hashem. Kol HaNeshama Tahalluka Hallelujah. But if you look, something very interesting, the Medrash tells us, what other word can neshama mean? Breath. It says there, okay. If you add the word yud after the shin, neshama is also a neshima. And they're related, but that's for a topic for a different time. So kol neshama tahalleluya. Every soul should praise Hashem. Comes to the Medrash, and the Medrash tells us something very, very different. Totally different way how you've ever seen this part of davening before. Let's read the next text.
Each and every breath we take, we should praise God. What is the source for this teaching? It is written, every soul shall praise God. Read it as for every breath, praise God.
Play around with the words. Don't read it as soul, read it as breath. Not that every soul should praise Hashem, but for every breath we praise Hashem. And really, this is the objective, by the way, of many of the davenings in our day, noticing Hashem's favors in the repetitive rhythms of life. And that's very important because, once again, going back to what we said earlier this morning, the repetition is our biggest enemy. Because that's the treadmill we don't want to get on, of acquiring, adapting, and feeling I'm lacking. And the davening is basically stopping us from adapting. How do we stop from adapting? By becoming appreciative. Let's read some other studies today that are showing us what the effects of gratitude are. So we'll read the next two texts. Where are we holding?
What's the, sorry, which are the Asaph said?
We'll get back to that in a second. Okay. Let's skip that one and we'll get back to there. We'll get back to Asaph, don't worry. Asaph always gets his, he always finds a way to get it. Yeah.
Okay, we'll split it.
Go. Yeah, you do the first one.
In 1998, my colleague Mike McCullough and I designed a program of research to examine the effect of a gratitude practice on psychological and physical well-being. In our first study, we randomly assigned college student participants one of three tasks. They either briefly describe in a single sentence 5 things they were grateful for, the gratitude condition, 5 hassles, the hassle condition, or 5 events or circumstances that affected them, event condition. Hassles are relatively minor, everyday stressful circumstances such as not being able to find babysitter, dealing with the rising price of gas, doing laundry, misplacing one's wallet. The time frame for each of these was the past week. Participants completed these exercises along with a variety of other measures of health and happiness, once per week for 10 consecutive weeks.
The results were quite striking and garnered considerable media attention. Participants in the gratitude condition feel better about the life as a whole and were more optimistic about the future than participants in either of the other control conditions. To put it into numbers, they were a full 25% happier than the other participants. Those in the gratitude condition reported fewer health complaints and even spent more time exercising. Something as simple as counting blessings once a week resulted in significant emotional and health benefits. So
this is counting blessings once a week. What about it? Imagine the spike of actually paying attention to a davening of Moed Ani once a day, or never mind 3 times a day. Let's continue reading on this study.
One of the most effective ways to deepen our own gratefulness is to write a letter of gratitude to an important person in your life whom you've never properly taken the time to thank, and then visit that person to present him or her with the letter. What was the effect of composing and delivering the letter for those who participated in the experiment? When their moods were measured after 1 week of doing the assigned exercises, participants were happier and less depressed. This boost in happiness and decrease in depressive symptoms were maintained at follow-up assessments 1 week and 1 month later. It turns out that a gratitude visit is one of the exercises that made people lastingly less depressed and happier than any other positive psychology intervention.
So, bringing all these texts, by the way, from all this contemporary writing on positive psychology, is not really our point. The point is it's the text from the Jewish perspective that we have. It's the lifestyle that we've been living that just shows everything that's being taught right now is something that we always understood. It's just the question is whether we as Jewish people actually took these texts seriously and implemented in our lives. And these perspectives from modern contemporary psychologists only help us give different type of expressions to it, give different type of understandings to it, but hopefully we use it for the positive and always to boost our levels of happiness. And we'll conclude, because we have to put in Asaph, so we'll conclude with the pasuk we have there.
Esau said, I have a lot, my brother. Let what is yours be yours. Jacob said, take now my gift that has been brought to you, for God has favored me, and I have everything. Jacob pressed him, and he took it.
What do you see over here? Yaakov takes the blessings. Then, later on, we know when Esau finds out about this, he wants to murder him. So Yaakov runs away to keep a low profile. He stays with Lavan and Haran, and then it's finally time to return. And he's gearing up for this massive showdown, and we know he prepared in three ways. Diplomacy, by sending gifts. War, by preparing his families for battle. And prayer, by davening to Hashem. Ultimately, their encounter is quite peaceful. Although Rashi says, Vayishakeu, Asa tried to bite him, but Pshat, it seems like it was quite a anticlimactic. You know, there was supposed to be this great showdown, and it's a love fest. Two brothers get together, and they're happy to see one another. Esav even refused to take the gifts. Originally, he refuses to take these gifts, as we see in this pasuk. The Kli Yakar points into a fundamental difference between the choice of words Esav uses to the choice of words Yaakov uses. Esav says, what does Esav say?
I have a lot.
I have a lot. What does Yaakov say?
We have everything.
I have everything. A lot is Esav not combating that natural process of adaptation. You can never feel like you have everything if you're not combating it. It's always, I have a lot, but a lot can always bring room for more. Something is always missing. Yaakov uses the words, I have everything. He's happy with what he has. He's mindful and he's grateful. And therefore, ultimately, although Esav, from the first perspective, says, I'm not going to accept these gifts, but because he doesn't see himself as an individual that has everything, ultimately he does accept these gifts. And we see simply from the wording in the Torah expressing this fundamental difference between one who is grateful, sees that he has everything, and one who has not overcome that natural concept of adaptation. So we'll conclude with that. And just a takeaway, this is really the joy of being grateful. That's the point. It's nothing new. It's not neuroscience. It's stuff that from a Torah perspective has always been available to us. And the question is, how much are we willing to use it to try to help us? And the concept of being grateful, like we're saying, is not only being grateful to that person, but it comes back to us and helps us with our happy emotions. What is being grateful? Through deed, and specifically through speech, being mindful, stopping, using davening, and specifically like the Moed Ani meditation that we did, using the first thing in the morning where we're setting the tone for the entire day, use that as the opportunity to make the day a better day. Conclude with that. I'll just look at the second. So Wednesday morning, 10 to 11, I'll be back here, and we're going to do health and halacha. Like I said, we're going to do the ethics of cosmetic surgery. It's going to be an interesting perspective. I think it'll take many people by surprise, the different elements that are considered. And then on Thursday, the same time again, 10 to 11, we'll have a shiur on spiritual relationships. That's what it says. We'll see what we come up with.
Thank you.